Alright, I just saw Shin Kamen Rider, the last of Hideaki Anno's Shin Trilogy, the others being obviously Shin Godzilla and Shin Ultraman. And while I definitely think I enjoyed this one, it is also easily my least favorite of the Shin Trilogy. Like, Shin Godzilla is like one of my favorite movies, way up here on the scale. And then you have Shin Ultraman, which was pretty fun. And then Shin Kamen Rider below that. It's a movie with a lot of flaws, but I think was overall, at the core of it, was really fun. Now, I'm not super familiar with Kamen Rider as a franchise. I've only seen a few episodes of O's, and I've read the original manga, which this movie actually takes quite a few cues from. Like, I wouldn't say it's a straight adaptation by any means, but it definitely touches on some of the ideas from this in interesting ways. But yeah, at its core, I think this was a fun movie if you're really into the ideas that Kamen Rider delves into, the ideas of what to do with power and how the nature of power, the nature of humanity, and how humanity should be guided using that power. Stuff like that, on a conceptual level, I think is very interesting, and I think Kamen Rider approaches it in a very... Shin Kamen Rider, I should say, in particular, approaches it in an interesting way that kind of had me hooked on it. A lot... Although, I will say... there is a lot put into this film. A lot of ideas. Like, if Shin Ultraman was like two films smashed into one film, you could arguably make this into a whole, like, season of a TV series. Which they have done. That is kind of what that is kind of what Kamen Rider is. It is a TV series full of these ideas. But in some ways, they condense them down pretty well. In other ways, I think they could have done a little bit better. The character development for the characters in particular kind of displays a pretty solid range of this. Takeshi Hongo, our lead for this, our Kamen Rider, I think he's fleshed out pretty well. He's immediately jumped into this role of being this super powerful transforming hero who doesn't quite understand what's going on yet, and he's immediately thrust into a very violent situation. By the way, I'm not super familiar with Kamen Rider, but this does seem like it might be on the more violent end of things. I'll leave it at that just so you can enjoy it when you get around to watching it, if you so choose. But he kind of just has to deal with that immediately. He has to deal with the fact that he has these powers and he can kill people with these powers very easily. And so he kind of has to come to terms with that and how he needs to control it and how he wants to use his powers. And I think over the course of the movie, they delve into that pretty well. The other kind of lead for this movie, Ruriko, I think her character is a little bit more complicated and not quite as not explored quite as well. There are a lot of conflicting elements with her character that are jammed tight together in this movie and not given enough room to breathe, in my opinion. I think she could have been a lot more fleshed out because there's a lot of really cool ideas there. It's just the execution of them is a little sloppy in some areas, a little jagged in running these ideas together. I think it could have used a little bit more fleshing out in that end. But characters aside, I think one of the biggest appeals of this movie in particular is just, aside from those concepts I mentioned earlier, is it actually does a pretty good job of setting up this world on a visual level, I think, in certain ways. Like it feels like a classic like tokusatsu kind of thing. I am a bit more familiar with Super Sentai, aka Power Rangers, I suppose, but so this is slight variation from this. Well, more than slight, but you get my meaning. But this definitely feels like a more, like, the visual aspects of this I think are very on point. And even just like the designs of the suits are great. The designs of the sets are really cool. One of the things I noticed, like, near the end of the movie is that they really put a lot of detail into, like, how each of these characters, the enemy characters in this movie, fight. How they move, how they act. It's very... In some ways, it's very on the nose, depending on which insect they are based off of, whether it's like the wasp one or the praying mantis one and stuff like that. It's very on the nose, but also very fun and very cool that they put a lot of detail into how these characters fight. And the fight scenes are fun overall. They are very fun. And they can be pretty impacting. However, there is the way this movie is shot is interesting. And again, I'm not super familiar with old Kamen Rider stuff, so I don't know if this is like Anno directly using the cinematic style of that, but a lot of the fight scenes are very up close, and I would say at least half of this movie is filmed using a hand cam. Like, maybe not half, but a pretty significant portion of this film is not shot from a still position. The camera is moving around, the camera is constantly bobbing and weaving, especially in the action scenes. It's getting real up close with a lot of stuff. And in some instances, it can really accentuate like the emotions of that scene. Like when it does like first person perspectives, you can really get into the emotions of the characters that the shot is emulating. But in other instances, it makes it really hard to follow the action. And that's further, what's the word? That's like further intensified by how this movie is cut. The editing in this movie is very jarring. It is very confusing in that a lot of this movie doesn't have what you would call preparatory shots. Shots that prep you for the next action. A lot of those kinds of shots are missing from this film, and so the cuts feel very jarring, and especially in the first half of this film, it felt like I was playing catch-up constantly. Like, not a whole lot, but like it's like it's like a 1 or 2 second delay of like, wait, what's happening now? Oh, this is oh wait, what's happening now? And it made this very difficult to follow at times. Like, it was not a smooth watch. I'm gonna be perfectly honest there. So on that end, I'm not a huge fan of that. But then, like, once like all that stuff settles down, all of a sudden you see like oh, there's some railroad tracks. Oh, there's some telephone poles at sunset, and you remember that Hideaki Anno directed this movie, and you're like, ah, why I like this part. I like this part of the movie. Because there are some pretty beautiful shots scattered throughout this film. But I think it could have used more. It could have used more of the Ultraman look. It could have used more of the Shin Godzilla look. I think also a lot of that is due to the fact that there's not a lot of downtime in this film. There's not a lot of time for characters to just talk. Like, there's like 1 or 2 scenes, I think, in particular. But otherwise, it is just plot, 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 plot. And it's good plot. It's interesting plot. But it would have helped with the... Like, I was never bored watching this. I can say that much. But it also didn't get me super invested in a lot of it. And that really came back to bite it in the final resolution scene to, like, how the big bad is resolved. Not going to say how, but to be honest, that scene just kind of fell flat for me. So there's just a lot of really cool things and a lot of not so cool things in this movie. Fortunately, one of the things that I can say is unambiguously really cool is the soundtrack, because Taku Iwasaki did the soundtrack for this movie. What? Like, I haven't heard anything from Taku Iwasaki in several years, actually. Mostly because I'm not caught up on, or I don't plan to be caught up on. I think he's doing the soundtrack for Bungo Stray Dogs. I think he's been doing that. But otherwise, I think the first season of that was the last time I heard him on a soundtrack. If you don't know, he's done the soundtracks for Soul Eater and Gurren Lagann, the Battle Tendency arc of JoJo's Bizarre Adventures. He's, like, probably my favorite anime composer, and he definitely brought his Taku Iwasaki-ness to this film. There's a lot of really weird tracks and a lot of really over-the-top tracks, and also these, like, very emotional, moving orchestral lines that he's very that is the dichotomy of Taku Iwasaki to me, and it blends really well in this movie, and definitely helps to hype up the moments that need the hype, and also, like, smooth out the more emotional moments. Like, those string tracks really come through really solidly. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say on this one. I was a little bit disappointed. Overall, I still enjoyed the ride. The action scenes were fun, and the choreography was actually pretty good. Like, despite how it was filmed, I think the actions that actually took place were really fucking cool, and all of the technology was really cool. The CG was on par with what you would expect from a tokusatsu series. Again, I've seen a few episodes of Kamen Rider O's, and a lot of the CG is on that level. So I kind of expected that going in, so I wasn't super disappointed by it. But the bat person in this does not look good when the CG kicks in. It's not great. But I can forgive that because a lot of the other stuff looked really cool. But then a lot of the other stuff didn't look really cool because it was just shot so unsteadily and the editing was so not tight. So yeah, if you're like a super hardcore Kamen Rider fan, I would definitely recommend this one. I think you will find a lot to like in this. If you're like just dipping your toes into the world of tokusatsu, maybe go watch Shin Ultraman first, or no, actually, go watch Shin Godzilla first. This should not be your like dip into the world of Kamen Rider and tokusatsu stuff. I'm feeling, what am I feeling? And that's probably like a light to decent 6 on this one. I thought it was good. but had a lot of issues in it. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. I think there's another anime film coming out in June, something like that Lost Castle movie or whatever. So I guess I'll see you back for that. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.